Hello.
Hi there.
You look so cozy with your fire.
I am now. Yes, it's very warm. It's actually almost too warm in here.
Oh,
But
I could use that. My teeth, I was talking to producer Adam, and my teeth are shivering. I'm so cold. I
oh
just
no, really?
cannot warm up. Yeah, my fingers are blue. It's cold in Chicago. Actually, I will tell you the temperature just so you
Yeah.
can feel sorry for me. Hold on. Okay. It is 16 degrees, but it feels like 3.
Oh my gosh. Wow, 16. Yeah, there's a reason why I left Chicago a few decades ago and rarely come back, and it's exactly that. I mean, here in Oregon, I think it's probably about in the mid 40s right now. But I went out earlier today and I was just wearing a light jacket.
Oh
I
my
wouldn't
goodness.
have wanted to stay out there for too long, but yeah, it was not too bad. Just
Yeah,
overcast and
it's
gloomy.
crazy. It's crazy. And then we had the moon. We had 2 days of full moon. So I put some crystals out, kind of charge them a little bit and manifesting, of course, with the full moon, which I love. So that's cool. And so the other day, I had a memory of something, and I thought it would be really fun to bring this memory to your forward.
Oh my gosh.
Are you ready?
Does it involve me? I hope
Yes,
not.
of course it involves
Oh
you.
no, I am really scared.
Do you remember
No,
when
I
we
don't. Let's move on.
no, do you remember when we were in Dallas? And well, first thing that happened is we were trying to find our hotel and the GPS wasn't working. And you just said, let's just feel. And, like, which way should we turn? What do you feel? I'm like, right, left, right. And all of a sudden, right in front of us was the hotel. Do you remember that?
I do.
Do you really?
But
Okay.
was that the hotel where we got lost once we went inside it?
We had a whole workshop, and you had these ladies. I think there were like 6 ladies that were taking your class. And so we got a suite, and we wanted to put some snacks out. Do you remember that? And so we wanted to make it very pretty, like elegant, right? And so, there wasn't very much in the room. So we decided to kind of walk through the hotel and find. Are you
Yeah.
remembering that?
Yes, because we were told like it would cost like hundreds of dollars, like if we just wanted to like get some silverware and glasses from the hotel. And I had been a banquet server when I lived in Sedona at the Hilton, so I understood like the whole banquet setup. So I'm like, let's just go down to the banquet area. We'll just find all we need is like 10 glasses and some forks, a few plates. So we'll just find it ourselves, and then we'll just use it, and then we'll leave it in the room. We're not stealing it or anything. And
Right.
so
And
we
I'm like, well, you seemed very confident about that. So I just kind of like a little puppy follow you. And we're going through the hotel, and we're trying to find this place, this
banquet area.
location of a banquet area. And we're going in and out of like little, secret rooms or something. I don't know. And then we end up going into this one room. And it was like going in. You remember the National Treasure movie where they walk in and gold everywhere? We were like,
It's like angels are,
oh,
yeah,
like
exactly. It's
bouncing.
like there's all the silverware and the plates and the glasses, everything, serving trays, everything we could ever want to bring up to our room.
Right.
And but
And
then
but I look back and the door slams shut, and we're stuck in the room.
we were locked in the room.
So I
And
remember up to the, and then I
there was
think
a
I spent.
door. There was another door in the room. And we open it and it's like to the fire escape. So
Oh, wait, was
yeah,
that open? I remember like, oh,
we
okay.
tried it open. And so we couldn't really, well, I think we took maybe like, a couple of forks and a glass or something, but we're like, we couldn't carry that much. going down it was like regular stairs, but it was used as like a fire escape. So we start to go down and we look down and there is a security guard like
Right.
and looking
Yeah.
up at us. And, there was no turning back. So we had to go down and then explain to him that we really weren't trying to steal things. And as
In the
it turned
meantime,
out,
like our bras full of like it's forks and
blurry.
spoons
And
or like under our armpits. We're hiding all these things.
Yeah. And as it turned out, they had tracked us on their cameras, like through the entire hotel. They knew everywhere we had gone. They knew who we were. They were like Miss Katz.
Oh, right. Oh my God. They knew your name.
They knew exactly
I forgot about that.
Yeah. This was the Hyatt.
God.
But
we did fancy.
We didn't get in trouble. But that was also the trip where before we went, we had a workshop booked at this old historic church. And we were so excited that we had found it. I think you had found it. It was this gorgeous place. And for months, we were planning on doing our workshop there. And then about a week before, I tuned in clairvoyantly just to see like, how's the whole workshop going to go? And I got psychically that there was something really wrong with the place. So do you remember that? I was like, we have to change our plans. Like as soon as we land, we have to go over to the church because I think something's wrong with it. And sure enough, when we got there, the outside was beautiful, but we walked in and she's like, the receptionist, she's like, I'll show you where your workshop is going to be. And it was downstairs in this dinky basement. It smelled totally like mildew and mold and was dark. And we're just like, no, there is no way we can stay here. So I like to use that as an example of how it really can be useful to use your intuitive abilities to tune into what you're about to encounter. And of course, we couldn't like fix the hotel, or the church, but we came up with that last minute plan because we didn't have that many people attending.
No, it was like a small little group. Yeah.
So we were like, oh, we could go stay in a nice hotel. And we had that like elite membership where they gave us the free food, that room where we could just go up and eat whatever.
The cappuccinos, and we were all fancy. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, that was like the favorite part.
Free cappuccinos at midnight.
Oh my gosh, that was so funny. So, well, today we're going to be talking about cults. And I know when I was, I think in high school, both of us, when we were in high school, I think they actually had teaching. There was a class where they taught us about cults. So my cult stuff kind of goes way back in time. And so it's always been something in my radar about cults. And I've always questioned like what defines a cult. And because it can have blurred lines, what a cult is and things like that. And then it's interesting when we promoted this show, my niece, Rachel, she is learning it in her school, and she was kind of freaking out that she's just about to do like a report or an assignment on cults. So she said that if she has time and finishes her homework, she's going to tune in, and will probably have a bunch of questions for us. So
then she could tune into the cult of Michelle and Debra, the Psi Chicks cult.
Yeah, the Psi Chicks cult. Oh, she said hi. That's me. Okay, so she is online. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Rachel. Yeah, I say that jokingly. It's kind of creepy though, and oh my gosh, there's so much we have to talk about with this topic. And yeah, like as you say, it's such a fine line. What's a cult? What's a religion? Is religion a cult? Are universities cults? There are so many groups that really political groups. Right now there's a few different cult experts. I had recently interviewed for another show Dr. Steve Hassan, who wrote the book called The Cult of Trump. And other cult experts are also writing about how right now the whole MAGA thing is really a cult. And they are really justified in doing that, whether or not you believe that Trump is the best candidate or not. Totally different topic. Same thing with religion. You can totally be very passionate about a religion, but also critically analyze it for, does this have cult-like tendencies? So to prepare ourselves, we decided we were going to binge watch several cult documentaries, because right now there are so many documentaries about cults. And Michelle, I'm not sure where you just went here, but so some of the movies we decided that we were going to analyze. One was the Sarah Lawrence cult, and another one was the Twin Flames cult, and then another one was Love Has One cult, and these are more recent ones. Now, of course, there's been so many documentaries about Scientology, and another cult that we did want to assess was called Wild Wild Country. That one blew me away because I'm living in Oregon right now, and this was a cult that set roots up in a small Oregon town in the 1990s and basically took over. And not only did they take over, and this really was a cult where they were having all kinds of sex with each other, and they were worshiping the guru Osho, who went by a variety of names. But they had come over from India, and they sometimes had gatherings of tens of thousands of people, and they tried to take over politically. And that was pretty interesting because they actually, at one point, there was a very critical vote because they wanted to put their people on the city council, and all the townspeople were fighting against them. And they actually drove all over the United States picking up homeless people and brought back something like 5,000 homeless people to Oregon just so that they would vote. And at the last minute, the city council, or it might have been the state, not sure if it was city or state, but they came and said, no, people can't vote if they don't actually live here. And then the cult had 5,000 homeless people who at first were really excited because they had a place to sleep and a place to stay. But then they started to see they weren't being treated too well. And of course, some had mental health issues. And basically the cult members just started driving them all over Oregon and dropping them off. And then they were really getting pissed off at the locals who did not want them to be there. And they actually poisoned, they were like cultivating things like botulism, and they actually cultivated diseases and spread them all over the salad bars in the local restaurants, and made like all the people who lived there really sick. And they were eventually raided by the FBI, and they eventually were shut down, and they found their lab where they had done this. And so that documentary is Wild Wild Country. It's really interesting. But Michelle, I've just been kind of doing a summary here of the different movies that we were going to analyze. And there's so much here to really talk about. But, I was thinking that really the people that watch this show, the people that are our friends, are our students, are part of the different remote viewing and psychic organizations we're a part of, all of these people are not that different than the people that we see in these movies who get sucked up into cults. I was watching the one cult today, Love Has One, and I was thinking, like, these are really nice people who were part of the cult, like not the leaders, but just some of the women that were drawn to the mother and what did they called her? I think Godmother and Godfather, and they were kind of creepy people. But other people, I was like, wow, these could easily just be our friends. So I think it is important to talk
or
about
ourselves,
or
if we're
ourselves,
not paying attention, for sure. So basically, what you're saying is anybody could get sucked into a cult.
Well, anyone can. And I think probably by the time that, especially people that are into these topics, because let's look at the characteristics of what would draw someone to a cult. And, I think a lot of times when people are assessing this, they look at negative characteristics, right? Like in the past, when they looked at like, well, who joined the Jonestown cult or the Waco cult or Scientology, they would say, well, it's people that are lonely, or people that are looking to belong somewhere, or people that are just not really they're just kind of lost in the world. But and that is one those are characteristics of some of the people. But as we know, like with Scientology, some of the most not lonely people, the most famous people, the most well connected, the busiest, the most passionate people, they do join cults as well. And when people are spiritually open, where they have open minds and they can tune into higher powers and tune into they're interested in more than just what's within themselves, but connecting to something larger than themselves, and they're open-hearted, then they are very vulnerable to people that want to take advantage of that. And I think one of the problems is that people, they have a really moving experience. They have an experience where like they feel like they connected with the universe, maybe through meditation, spiritual practices. A lot of times psychedelics might be involved. They have something that really transforms them, and then they just can't tell the difference between that experience and the people that were present when they had that experience. So they just attribute all the great things that are happening to them to that one person. And of course, we see this in religions as well. So what are your thoughts? I know you were very much part of a religion and the Orthodox religion for a very long time. So is there a difference like between, let's say, Orthodox Judaism and say different kinds of cults?
I think, because I look at all religions in a way that, it has cult like features, but not quite a cult. Because for me, a cult is where they end up, where people feel like they can't leave, or they feel like, they're doing some extreme things, that are unhealthy to people. And so I think that if we went through what, like a checklist of what defines a cult, um, I think there would be a lot of common things. There's a leader, there are followers, there are rules, things like that. But I think where it kind of moves into a different direction is when, there's some unhealthy kind of things going on in there, you know. So
Well, let's, you make some good points there. Let's kind of unpack that. So can't leave. Like let's talk about what that means, because yes, there are literally situations where people are being physically restrained or locked into rooms. They start to voice dissension, and then they like in we've heard that in Scientology where people would sometimes actually get like locked up. Or they would be threatened, their lives would be threatened, or more often than not, they would be told, well, you could go, but we're keeping the kids, because a lot of times their spouse or somebody that they have children with isn't willing to go. And so I think there's different layers of what it means to be free to leave. And this gets really into any abusive relationship. That's what I was like really finding parallels with, like when I watched the documentary about the Sarah Lawrence cult, where the leader, a lot of times these leaders aren't setting out to say like, oh, we're going to be a spiritual movement, or we're going to be a cult. It's just a bunch of people start to gravitate towards that one person, and that person starts to get more and more control over how they think and how they feel and their behavior. And then they start they start to act in different ways they didn't initially act and become more and more abusive. And in the Sarah Lawrence cult, what was so disturbing, that was a really, really disturbing documentary and painful to watch, but I was actually glad I did. And I think that anyone interested in psychology should really watch that, especially psychology or relationships, because there was one girl where she was just about to get her medical degree. I think she was either studying at Harvard or about to go there, but she had an internship lined up, very brilliant. Her brother and sister were already like drawn into this group where just this charismatic guy had taken a father. Actually, I'll back up a little bit. There was a university and there was this guy who was the father of a girl of a bunch of students that were living in an apartment together going to school. And he was very charismatic. And he basically like seduced one woman and then got the other people in the house to like start to listen to him and do whatever he said, because they thought he was always listening to them, and he would sit there and talk to them for hours. And then he eventually moved off campus into an apartment and they all went with him. And so some of those students, their sister, who was across the country about to graduate from medical school, he started to basically seduce her over the phone. And by the time he convinced her that people were trying to kill him and kill her, she came over, she left school, went to the apartment, and basically like became his wife, but also became a total prisoner like in his house. And he basically like drove her nuts by just constantly criticizing her. And there's scenes in there like where it showed this like beautiful, intelligent, successful woman in a matter of a couple months was basically like in a ball on the floor, like spasming and catatonic at different times. And it was all from abuse. So my question would be, is this much more different than domestic abuse, when somebody wants to leave, but they're told, if you leave, we'll take your kids. If you leave, no one else will ever love you again. If you leave, like your future is ruined, you're going to be lonely, or I'm going to come after you. Do you really see a difference between those two topics or situations?
Well, I can't answer that because I had a technical difficulty and I didn't hear. So repeat I had to change over. Anyway, I don't have to go into it, but we had a problem. So ask me again.
Yeah, well, basically so we're trying to really sort out here, what are the dynamics of cults that make them different than other religions, religious groups, and other situations that wouldn't be a cult. And also, I'm drawing parallels to other aspects or situations in life where I think like there's kind of a deeper, larger issue of how humans relate to each other and how some get power over others. There's a term called undue influence, and it might be more helpful rather than speaking in terms of, is this a cult? Is this group a cult? Is this group not a cult? Is there undue influence happening? And the definition of this term is when one person in an uneven power role is able to have influence over another one. So basically, this could include even like a work situation, definitely any kind of spiritual leader or religious leader already has power over the people that come to worship with them. They already have power over them because it's considered like they're supposed to be the closest thing to God. So have you in your life experienced that where there was some kind of religious leader, and you weren't supposed to question them. You were supposed to listen to them because they were considered to be closer to God than you were, and therefore a spiritual authority. Have you ever
I
encountered
think,
that?
yeah, I mean, the only thing that I can think of that would be close to it, but not, I'm not sure if, going back to religion and certain things, I think there's a common thing in all religion, but I don't, I'm talking about the universal known religions, not what we call a cult that could be a religion, you know? So, like, Christianity, Catholic, and all those things. I think you have those elements of what a cult can be defined of, but in my personal experience, there was no abuse or anything like that. But there was this kind of idea where, um, I don't know, it's hard to say because you do have somewhat of a freedom to kind of have your own thoughts. But it's, like my mom always said, it's not the religion, it's the people. Sometimes the people can get carried away with things. And so I don't know, it's kind of hard. I have a hard time. This is a big question for me. And I've, also been asking it in a joking way. I would call it a cult. Um, but all the dramatic things about the movies and documentaries that we watch and the things we hear are not going on in where I had experiences. If that makes any sense, I don't know. But I do, like, I will say that there are like cult like areas that it could be looked at that way. And so, but I also want to add another thing, um, that would be kind of along the lines is, um, when certain communities get together, like people that are in, they all have something in common and they're very diehard about it. So, think of people that are into cosplay or, Dungeons and Dragons, or, like a whole group of people that are into Star Wars. I think they even started a sort of religion with Star Wars people. I forgot the name of it, but it was like a thing that was, they were trying to get and take off with that, which it has all the qualities that could be, because in the movies they talk about the force and all that stuff. So there are a lot, like, I think, that's the big question for me. And I don't know if anybody in the chat, um oh, more like a cult following. Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
even, yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point, and it's like even remote viewing, can that, people, we get so absorbed in it and obsessed with it and passionate about it, and then there's different groups that form around it, different more established organizations or smaller groups that work together. So yeah, anything that you're passionate about and believe in, and that you want to invite others into because it is fun or exciting, or it's just something that has really enhanced your life. But a group practicing remote viewing or playing Dungeons and Dragons or something like that in and of itself, like, let's talk about what would have to happen, for, let's say, a remote viewing group to become a cult. What do you think, like, would have to start to happen where we would say, yeah, that's starting to border a cult?
I think that if, if I think if, yeah, Adam brought up like harmful or exploitive. So meaning, those are major things that would be a difference between if, they're hurting somebody or whatever. Um, there's also the element of brainwashing too that we haven't even talked about. So, so in remote viewing, let me think here. In remote viewing, we don't have one leader. That's one thing. We don't have one leader. We don't
There are some teachers that have quite large followings, right? Like a lot of times people will gravitate to a particular teacher and will feel like if they don't take all of that teacher's classes that they are going to miss out on something, or they're not going to be the best viewer that they want to be, or they're not going to be able to be successful if they don't take all of those classes. We do see that in other cults as well. You know, it's kind of like, okay, you have to do all, you have to get all your points, you have to take all your classes, you have to graduate. And there is also kind of like, you know, insiders levels of hierarchy, not formal, of course, in like, say, in remote viewing, but, you know, it's like, okay, there's this teacher and they have their inner circle, and, you know, the inner
I
circle.
feel like those are like splitter, you know, like splitter groups. It's not like the whole remote viewing community is a cult, you know. And then I like, let's see, we have, you know, like we don't have like a couple of people are saying like worshiping people. Nobody like worships anybody to my knowledge. I mean, maybe individual people may have a feeling like they worship someone, but it's not like a collective thing where people worship. And then Carl in the chat also said a them and us mentality, which is also a good point to bring up. But I think, and nobody's trying to brainwash anyone or try to get them to join it. You know, it's so those are all other
Well,
things.
you know, I would say with some of the things you mentioned, I might disagree a little bit. Like,
No,
well,
you
yeah.
will not disagree with me.
Well, I'll give you an example of when I went to my original clairvoyant school, the Berkeley Psychic Institute, in the 1970s. You know, people would occasionally say like, oh, that sounds like a cult that you're in. And I would be like, oh, that's totally ridiculous. And then after a while, I started to realize that, you know, it wasn't like anyone was saying like, oh, you can't leave here, or, you know, we're going to force you to stay. But there would be constant statements like, you know, people who are outside of this organization, they're really ungrounded and they're really flaky. And, you know, this is the only place you're going to find like, you know, psychics that are healthy. Everyone else out there who's being intuitive is unhealthy. And if you go out there, you know, you're not going to have anyone to help you if you're struggling. And it was these messages over and over again. So and then there was also where if they found out that we were taking other classes elsewhere, or the time I went with some teachers had left the school at that point and went to the Philippines, and I ended up going with those teachers to the Philippines. And when I came back, I was told that before I could go back into the building, I had to sit down and have a healer heal me and take out the spirits from the Philippines before they would let me come back into the school. So I was actually forced to receive a healing, which, you know, it sounds like an oxymoron, really. You know, it was more like, I don't know what that was, like almost like we're going to give you an exorcism because, you know, you went with some other teachers instead of paying us to take you on this trip and tour. And so when I was looking at, you know, gosh, do I really want to stay here? Because every time I would walk into the building at that point, I would just get like this splitting headache. And so it kind of turned from this being like, for the first year of my program, like the most amazing place where I learned so much and had the most amazing teachers, to a place where I started to feel like all this control, you know, people wanting to have a say. And again, it wasn't like, some of it was overt, like, you know, no, we don't want you to go study elsewhere. But they always had reasons, you know, that were logical reasons for not going to study elsewhere, or being, you know, negative about anything you were doing outside of the school. And at the point where I said to myself, you know, I need to leave here, this isn't working for me. I had to work through so much because I really held the belief that I might never find anyone else who, you know, understood psychic stuff or, you know, thought like I did. And I was facing like a very lonely future. And the only thing that saved me was, having learned that I can manifest what I need to out there. So right now, I don't know, hardly anyone out of the school that's into these topics, but I'm going to, use the law of attraction, use what I know has worked for me in other areas to call forth like-minded people and other communities that I could connect with. And, at that point, I hadn't even ever taken a class in remote viewing or anything. It was a total different modality. But so, I still go back, they would have us tithe, and tithing is, a big part of a lot of different religions. And tithing basically means, working for free, volunteering. So not only did we pay the school, but we also had to put in so much volunteer hours. And so when looking at all of this, and some of the volunteer work, like I didn't mind because I was making flyers or making posters.
Hold on
but
a second.
People were like cleaning the owner's ranch and cleaning their house.
When you were in your doctorate program, it was required. I mean, you had to volunteer. A lot of people have to volunteer in that too.
I totally, when I was in graduate school, I was like, this is a cult. Like that's what it kept feeling like. It totally.
I mean, almost. So what we're almost saying is like every possible organized group could be a cult, which I think that it can't be. Everything can't be a cult.
Yeah,
but
no. Well, let's talk about that. Like, let's
talk about
how is graduate school like a cult? Okay, like we are forced to go sit in this little room, and we're told, read like 10 books throughout the week and come in here and talk about them. And it doesn't matter that we don't want to talk about these books because they're like philosophers that, like Heidegger, who was a Nazi, like literally he worked with Hitler, and now we have to read his book in graduate school. Or Ken Wilber, who's I think is the most boring transpersonal psychology author. We have to carry around his book. I mean, that's abusive enough. In 105-degree heat, we're carrying this huge thick book that's just like dreadful to read. So we're there, and it's like the longer we're there, the more miserable we are, but we have to stay. Like they're not forcing us to stay, but after you've just spent like 3 years of, away from your family, I had a scholarship, so I didn't have to pay that much, but, I stopped seeing clients for a year. The stakes get higher and higher every year that you're in school. And it's like, if I leave now, I've lost everything. And not just that, but everyone I know knows I'm going for this. And if I get out now, everybody is going to know that I dropped out, so and this is what everyone's thinking. And this is why so many, graduate students are so stressed out, because at some point it's like, that's where I get to, like, are we really free to leave? Like, what is freedom? Yes, I can do this, but the implications are so huge. And, and then it's also, this is another trait of cults. People get exhausted. They get run down, right? Like they're put in situations where they barely sleep because they're working so much, whether it's you're studying or you are having to do all the tasks that the rest of the cult members want you to do. Hence like graduate school, it's like 3 hours of sleep a night. And so you're tired, you're exhausted, you're going after something. And the thing about my program was that, you have to get your dissertation committee together to write a dissertation, because you can't leave until you have written your dissertation. But at my school, and this is true of a lot of graduate schools around the country, is there's not enough people, there's not enough faculty to sit on your dissertation committee. Or, someone will agree. And like I had one person say, yeah, I'll be on your committee, but I'm not going to be able to read your proposal until next summer. Like 10 months from now, I'll be able to read your proposal. And then when she read it, it was like she gave me one paragraph of comments, 10 months later. So yeah, are we, really, really free when they're saying, no, sorry, we don't have enough people to put on your committee? It could be like, an endless situation. So to me, that is like you need to do this to leave, but we're not gonna help you with this. And if you were smart enough, you would figure it out yourself. So, and that's not just where I went to school at University of West Georgia. That's many, many schools, and even psychology schools. So to me, that's like both abusive, and that also has cult-like aspects. The other thing is, like, you have to use different language. They develop, a lot of these cults, they start dressing a certain way, they start developing certain terminology, certain behaviors that you have to match what everyone else is doing. And if you don't, you'll be looked down on or given, less privileges. Yeah, what do you think of that?
Well, I think that cults pry or prey. Sorry, pry. They prey on vulnerable people, and all the things that you mentioned about your personal experience were your vulnerabilities, and um, people that are strong-minded uh, would would be at a place where if they had to leave a cult, or maybe they wouldn't even be uh, be swayed into a cult. So I think that that is a big part that plays in this. And some of the things, like right now, I'm gonna like kind of like pull out the view of the lens and talk about the younger people right now who are the millennials and the Z's and all that, who are feeling very lost right now. And they're also they're looking for a community, and that's really where it starts, is people that are looking for a community. And these people that do the cults, they know exactly, right, Diane said gangs, cults and gangs, all that stuff. It's people want to fit in, and that's something that gives people security, and they feel good about that. So yeah, so I think
Well,
that.
and the twin flame cult is a really good example of that. Where, did you have a chance to watch that one?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So, do you remember the exact name of it for people if they want?
uh I can, hold on, I have.
So, while you're looking that up, so I'll just give a synopsis. Basically, this couple, they got together and they were teaching classes in online, and it was helping people to prepare themselves for their twin flames. And they were operating under the premise that if people took their classes, they would meet their twin flame. The problem was, many were not. They were not finding anyone to go out with, or not finding the right people. And so they weren't having enough examples of successes. And they also were like having these classes and these group meetings just like nonstop, where they would just want people to constantly be coming to their meetings. And so the two people running this came up with the idea that they would start putting members together. But the problem was, they didn't have enough men. The majority, maybe like, I don't know, 90% of the people coming to their classes were women. And so, they hooked up together all the people that they could, but then they had to find creative ways to get them to hook up with other people. So first, like, there is one example in that movie, pretty disturbing. This girl, she was only like 17 or so, and she's at one of their meetings, and she says to them, I'm just not meeting anyone. And they're like, that can't be true. There has to be someone you're meeting. And she's like, well, right before class, some guy like said hi to me on Facebook, and they're like, yes, that's it. That's your twin flame. And she's like, no, I don't think so. I don't even know who he is. And they're like, that is your twin flame, and you need to contact him and you need to go be with him right now. And she's like, really? And they're like, yeah. Well, this guy turns out to be schizophrenic. He's a much older guy, violent history, lives in Utah. They're in, I forget where they were, but she ends up like within a couple weeks going to be with him and is with him for the next year, living this nightmare as she's under this belief that this is her twin flame. And meanwhile, the guy is like totally nuts. So that was just like one example, but then it gets even more ridiculous. They end up saying to their members, they get the idea, well, we want to pair you guys together with each other, but there's not enough men. So we're going to turn you guys, some of you, into men. And you're really supposed to be a man, and you need to go get a gender, what's the formal word?
Reassignment or whatever. Yeah.
You need to get a sex change operation basically and be with this person, and you're going to be the man and you're going to be the woman. And I know, because I'm God, that you two are meant to be together. And then they show like the people actually do this. Some, and they're at first they're like, I don't want to be with her, like I'm not into women. But then they get convinced that's what they're supposed to do, and if they don't do it, the whole group is going to fall apart. And maybe they're not living their destiny, and maybe they just don't know enough. So and the way they were able to do this is because they had layers of people that were invested in this, right? So it wasn't just the leaders. They had like people that they were other people that they were paying money to like be counselors to the new people, and they would like stick someone with the people that they were trying to manipulate and just keep talking to them and counseling them. And they actually did have, I mean, imagine having part of your anatomy removed or changed because someone tells you that you need to go turn yourself into another gender so you can be with your soulmate. It's really hard to believe, but it's right there on camera. And some of these people eventually had realizations like, oh my God, what have I just done here? But
yeah, I checked on they still have their Facebook group too, by the way.
They're still active. They are, and they have several lawsuits. I'm intentionally not saying their name right now. I mean, we can talk about sorry, I have something on my face here. Intentionally not saying their names, but they are an active group right now. And
yeah, it's called Twin Flame Universe or University, something like that. Yeah. And the movie I put in the chat, Escaping Twin Flames Cult, and it's on Netflix. And after I watched that, I couldn't really watch any other ones. I was just like,
these are some of the most disturbing things to watch, but it is really interesting. And there's so much of this going on. And, a lot of times you just don't realize it until it's a little bit too late. So let's talk about like what would be some signs. Let's say someone, and this is another thing. A lot of times people are pulled in by their friends, by people who are trusted. And this is true of any scheme. There's so many like multi-level marketing schemes. And a lot of these cults are really designed on that premise that, one person is going to recruit someone else, and then that person is supposed to benefit, maybe by esteem, or they're going to get some money by recruiting other people, or they're going to get a higher up position in the organization, or just even, having the adoration and appreciation of the top leaders. A lot of times that's enough motivation. They want the leaders to really like them and think well of them. And they may they very much believe in, what's being taught, but people aren't pulled in by their enemies. And a lot of times they're not pulled in by complete strangers. It's by someone that that they know. And, it
And
just
that,
has to be a little bit more
uh,
indoctrinated.
on the positive side of that, that's what we use in marketing and promotions. We ask people to review our things because people trust the people closest to them, or if you have a plumber that comes, and fixes something in your house and you refer that plumber, they're going to trust that over anybody else. But Rachel, she has a question. I think she asked twice. That's why I'm bringing it up. She said, "Are people aware when they are in a cult?"
I think a lot of times not, that they wouldn't call it a cult. And in fact, I recently became aware of a group. I'm forgetting the guy's name now. But one of the tactics this cult leader used was to call everybody else a cult. And he was very prominent in the 1970s, and he like had sex with hundreds of his followers. But he, in his writings and in his talks, he says that the rest of the world is a cult, that the rest of the world that believes that people should be monogamous, that people should, follow certain ethics, all of that is a cult. He's the only one with his group that's not a cult. So these are very manipulative tactics. And a lot of times people, and, some of these groups, like they're not technically even considered religious groups, but it's a bunch of people that circulate around a charismatic leader. The other thing is that many times people are in altered states. And I think this is really important to talk about. There's two things. One is being in an altered state. So, and this is why I say this is very relevant to our audience, because most of us here meditate. We do different consciousness practices that bring us into different states. We're very susceptible. In fact, we're some of the most susceptible people to hypnosis, to hypnotic. What is the hypnosis and business when you pair that together?
Well, I call it hypno-marketing, but I think that's my word. I think I
Yeah.
made that up.
What was the guys back in the 90s who were really popular, where they took hypnosis and applied marketing to that? They were two guys, and I'm forgetting the name of. It's a practice that many people have learned, hypnotherapy techniques. So put people, into a deeper
Are you
state.
talking about NLP?
Yes, NLP.
Oh,
So
okay.
put people into a deeper state, and then they're more vulnerable to what you want for them to do. So that is one aspect. And then the other aspect, again, is using drugs, alcohol. A lot of these groups do that, freely give out drugs and alcohol to your members. And, they may have like ecstatic experiences. A lot of times they may have life-changing experiences, but they're no longer thinking critically. And then the other thing is also where the groups are involved in helping people to look at their own thought forms and programming. And this is very relevant because we do this work with people. You do hypnotherapy, not where we're trying to manipulate them, but you do hypnotherapy. I
Well,
do.
we are manipulating them.
Well, we
We
are.
are, like, we're using it for good, but we are. I mean, we're embedding positive messages to make, with their permission, to make them see the world differently. To We're helping them get rid of a habit that they want to get rid of or overcome a fear, and then we do kind of change their narrative.
Yeah, well, and it's like deprogramming, like mental deprogramming, spiritual energetic deprogramming. It's helping someone take a thought that's not helpful. And, where did that thought come from? It came maybe from their parents or from society, or some messages that got embedded that, life sucks, life is difficult. You're not very talented, you're not very smart, you're not going to ever be successful. And so we're taking these thought forms, getting them to look at them and then clear the thought forms, so that then new thought forms that are more useful and that will help them achieve their goals can come through. And so, this is part of so many psychological practices and spiritual practices, and it's a positive thing. But when you have someone who wants to take that and use it for their own selfish purposes, and to control that person, not to just help them, but to control them or take advantage of them, and so you put that all together, you're deprogramming them, but not really giving them, you're trying to insert, like, don't follow your parents, don't follow society, don't follow religious leaders, instead follow me. That's pretty much the message. And then you're exhausting them because you're just giving them one thing after another to do. And then in between that, you're telling them how much you love them, because this is also what cult leaders do, right? It's like they are like, I see you, I love you so much. But then if they do anything the leader doesn't like, they withdraw that immediately and say, no, I'm not going to give you my love anymore until you behave yourself, until you do exactly what I want you to do. And then you can have my love again. And then they use the other people in the group to be like, yeah, this person didn't behave themselves, they didn't follow what I said, so you guys shouldn't love this person either. And that was what was like so prominent in actually a lot of these cults. The Sarah Lawrence cult, it was like absolutely, like, it was horrifying, because the leader did that. He was like, we're going to shame this person over here until they get back in alignment with what we want to do. And everyone's going to do that to them. So, and even if they're not that overt, people are very sensitive, and it's like, oh, the leader isn't very happy with this person over here, so we're going to ignore them as well. So it is that group pressure that then gets in there. So, there's so many areas of vulnerability, and that's why I say, like, people that do meditate, that do want to open themselves up, want to be able to think differently, and look at people that are open-minded enough to see, like, the areas that they were controlled when they were younger, perhaps, or in other areas of society. They're open to this, and they can be most vulnerable. Now, of course, on the other hand, you have people that, maybe they're not getting sucked into these new cults, but they've been indoctrinated into religious groups and into their, societal way of thinking and limitations for basically their whole lives. So they may not be a whole lot better off either. It's hard to really say there. But what about the sexual element? Do you think there was recently on New Thinking Aloud, someone who was interviewed who had been part of a cult for a number of years, and she had been like the number one wife of the cult leader, who at any given time had 10 wives and was having sex with multiple people. So is it ever appropriate for a religious or spiritual leader to be having sex with their followers? What do you think about that? Because a lot of people I've come across through these documentaries or books not only say is, well, there was nothing wrong with it, like that's what everyone was doing, in the 90s. There's nothing wrong with it, or they're saying they got benefits from it, that they actually, the one woman was talking about devotion, and that there are benefits to being devoted to another person or group. Like, this is, a whole concept of being devoted to your guru. And they will say that there's nothing more special to go through than being devoted to another human being, where you would give your life and you would give your body to that other person in devotion. And they're, for anyone who's critical of that, they say, you know, you just don't understand. You're one of the unfortunate who, you know, didn't get to have sex with your guru and didn't get him to love you, you know, until he decided he had enough of you and kicked you out, which is what happened to this one guest who was interviewed, who was still like, yeah, you know, devotion and devotional sex is the way to go. So what are your thoughts on that? No giggling.
Oh, this is my favorite topic.
Well, let's see. What do the audience? What does
Yeah,
the
let's ask. Like,
let's
that
ask
is so
them.
good. Let's ask everybody in the chat.
Let's see what are some of our comments here.
Lucas said, Michelle, this is a serious subject.
Exactly.
Like,
Stop
I'm taking it
blushing.
very seriously.
You're turning redder than my shirt right now. So Lucas says this is a big problem in Tibetan Buddhism, which I am a practitioner of. And Lucas, I wish we could have Lucas just speak, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about that in the chat? And then let's look at, while he's writing about that, if he's comfortable doing so. Rose is saying, actually branding the woman with hot metal and the initials of the cult leader. Now that was
I saw that one.
Yeah, that was that one. They were in Los Angeles, and there were a lot of celebrities that got involved in that. And that was like a multi-level marketing, educational, personal development cult. And yeah, that was pretty nasty. And that really did involve many of the leaders, like basically like enslaving, like they would assign like slaves to the people that were higher up, and they had to do anything they wanted. They would call them night or day, and they had to drop everything and come over and do whatever they wanted them to do. Is really, really sick. And so these are, you know, extreme cases. Like imagine feeling like you have to just stop everything you're doing and go run over and do whatever someone asks you to do, and not thinking that that's not a problem. And yeah, they were branded the Nexus cult. Thank you, Rose. Branding them as sex slaves. So there is a lot of human trafficking, and in some of these cults, that actually is how they end up getting broken up, is that they're causing people to go across state lines, and they're causing them to have sex so that the group will have financial gain. That was also in the Sarah Lawrence cult. That was also in the Twin Flames cult. You know, even with the Twin Flames cult, by having the woman go across state lines and be with other people, or go to other countries and be with other people, you know, where that was enabling them to be able to say, we are successful here with pairing people up with our twin flames. Let's see.
The one thing, what was the cult where they were? No, I'm kind of where.
I'm giggling at what Adam just said. Viewers just went up. We just got more viewers when we started to talk about sex. Well, we'll keep that in mind for the future.
Well, the horrible thing of trafficking, I think, but you know, it's like already like an hour in. I guess we'll just, you know, kind of, we could have a part 2, but like maybe I would like to go into before we go, because I think it's a very important topic to bring up, is the trafficking and things like that.
Yeah. I also, just in the minute we have left, you know, want to say too, like as teachers, instructors, organizational leaders, you know, there's things that we can do. I mean, I've been aware of this for a very long time, the level of responsibility that we have when we work with other people, and to, you know, keep them empowered and make them so they're not dependent. And one way I've found to do that is to remind people, like, yes, you might benefit from what I'm teaching you, and you might enjoy the classes or whatever, but you could get the same stuff elsewhere. People might be different, teachers do things a little bit differently. Same thing like with psychic work and healing work. That's a whole other topic or related topic, but so many healers that have made such a big difference in people's lives, but then like John of God, who was abusing hundreds of women and children, just terrible, but also made a difference in their life. But reminding people that it's not about the one person, and they may find benefit from one person, but whatever they find in one person, they can find in other people. And just because someone has some talents or something to offer does not mean they're perfect, and does not mean that you give your life up for that person. I think that's definitely a theme in all of these movies, is that yes, some of these leaders had very charming qualities, but they also had a lot of darkness. And just because somebody has a special psychic gift or healing gift, that does not mean that you should give over your self-control and self-will over to them. And so we have to remind students, especially younger ones or newer ones, that are more susceptible to these things, or our clients. We have to do what we can to not have our clients be dependent on us. And I found over the years, when I worked with other psychics, where they would have, see the same client. I knew psychics that were meeting with the same client 4 or 5 times a week. I had a student like that who I didn't hear from her for a while. And I was like, oh, what have you been up to? And she's like, oh, I'm so busy with this healer. Like I meet with him every day. And I'm like, oh, what are you doing meeting with him every day? And she's like, yeah, well, he's healing me. He's helping me. And I'm like, that's a little strange that you're meeting with him every day. And as it turned out, she ended up giving him like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in the end, he said that he would like promote her as a psychic and hire her, but he took over all her websites. He got all her passwords, and basically like she had to shut down her whole business and give it over to him. So it's not healthy to be, having to meet with the same person all the time. There's warning signals about that. And as teachers, we need to be, extra cautious that people aren't getting dependent on us.
Yeah. I'm looking. Adam just brought up the incel group.
Oh, could we just talk? Do we have time to talk about that, or do we need to save that?
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you share with the audience if they're not familiar with the incel group?
So the incel is, well, what he wrote was the incel subculture is not formally a cult, but it shares some characteristics often associated with cult-like groups, especially in its more extreme or insular manifestations. And what it is a bunch of guys that feel rejected by women and turn that rejection kind of into hate. And they formed a group and they just like bash women all the time because they feel like, they can't, win with women, or the women are looking for a certain thing. And there are some of these people that are going on YouTube. I have my one son who started listening, and he told me that he was so mesmerized by this one speaker that he couldn't stop listening to what he had to say. He wasn't like agreeing with it, but he was just drawn in by his charisma and the things that he was saying. And he just became obsessed with learning more about what they're talking about. And then there's certain people that kind of rise up and kind of, I think they were attacking women and planning things and stuff like that. So
yes,
that one kind of, that came out of nowhere. I don't,
several have been arrested or actually committed crimes, attacked women. They believe that only a small group of men will be attractive to women, so that women go after the most attractive men or the wealthiest men, and all the others like don't get women at all. And so they're very angry and blaming the women. And then there's also the groups that are, I forget the name of the guy who wrote the book called The Game. It was actually quite a good book, very interesting, but very disturbing. And basically it's like groups of guys that hold seminars helping other guys pick up women, but they're helping them to do that. I mean, I actually think like, training guys to ask girls out on dates is a very good idea, because way too many guys are like totally afraid. They don't even know how to talk to a woman.
Do you remember that guy we met? Do you remember that guy we met?
Which one?
That one guy that went to that training and started trying to do it on us.
Oh, yes, the tall guy. Yes. Yeah, he started trying to do it on us. So the problem with what they do is they're not just like teaching them like, yeah, go up to a woman and, ask her out for lunch, but they're teaching manipulative tactics. Like one of the main tactics is like, go up to a group of women, and the one you're most interested in, ignore her. Like, pay lots of attention to everyone else, but ignore the one that you're interested in, because then she'll feel left out and she'll feel insecure. And then when she's at her lowest, then you could swoop in and pay her attention. And then she'll really want to be with you because she's so desperate for that. So these are like, that would be one of several tactics. And in the book, The Game, the guy wrote about that. I ended up actually going to his house he had a radio show, and I was like part of a panel, and I met him, and it was weird. Like, I felt like he was pretty much like ignoring me, and he never stopped ignoring me. So now don't know what that was about, but it wasn't a fun experience. But anyway, there's a lot of these groups that are forming as well. And this comes back to politics, which, not to get into it too deeply, but right now we are seeing, like in the Republican Party, that they want to be so cohesive around Trump, and they put pressure on everyone else. And I'm sure this is happening in the Democratic Party as well. It's just more overt it's more overt right now, but it's probably happening in both parties. And the problem is that then our senators are not thinking for themselves. They're not thinking for the people they represent. They're just putting peer pressure on each other to do exactly what they want and what the leader of the party wants. This is very dangerous for the rest of us. And this is why different cult experts are calling it like the cult of Trump. But in fairness, it's happening on the other side too, within the Democratic Party as well. And, if this keeps happening, there's going to be big problems, because, people are not making the best decisions anymore. There's a reason we have like a representative or representatives for every state. And if everyone just starts to lose their own minds and do the same thing that one person wants, we're no longer a democratic society. So I think this is very relevant for what we're, witnessing with the governance of our nation. And, it's happens in other countries as well. I'm not sure what the solution is, but just to raise awareness. It really is important that people think for themselves, and also that they don't just go along with their friends either. And I think that's something that could be taught. Like, can you have friends, and can you learn how to be a social being, but make your own decisions? And look to see where maybe you're being influenced by your friend who's being influenced. Always look to see like, well, who influenced them, and are they like caught up in something that they're not even aware of, and they're pulling you into that. Well, it looks like we're out of time.
I know it went by so fast. So I think we should have a part 2, and I'd like to kind of bring a couple guests on that have been able to escape these situations. And my sister is a cult leader, always influencing me.
And that's Adam talking about you.
Yes.
I
um,
know you're always influencing me too, such as like, let's do this podcast. Let's do Psi Chicks.
in a good way, in a good way. So, but
That's
oh,
what they all say,
he has
Michelle.
two sisters. He has two
Just
sisters.
trust
So
me.
you don't know it's me. It could be my other.
Sure.
So yeah, I think yeah, I'd like to have them come on and talk about their perspective, which would be very cool.
Yeah,
So
that would be. But I'm glad that we've had the time just to talk with ourselves, and having some of the people in the chat was nice too. But before we even started this show, we envisioned that we just wanted to take our conversations that the two of us have and just share with other people. And so I think that this has been a pretty good representation of when we do get on the phone and chat for hours. These are the kinds of things that we're trying to work through. And it's okay that we're not, all experts in this field, but I don't think this topic is going to go away any further, any sooner. But I think it is pretty interesting that so much awareness is being put on it with these documentaries lately, and I hope that will make some difference.
I agree. I agree.
And what
So
do you have coming up? What is our
So
next?
so I'm working on our next show will be the week after next. As you know, we changed it to Wednesdays. So we're going to be doing that special ASMR
Yeah.
show. So that will be the last Wednesday of January. I don't remember the date right now, but if everyone keeps up with our promos, we'll let you know. But that's going to be a very exciting show, something very, like, I don't think a lot of people talk about it or anything like that. So it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, that'll be cool. And that's where like people make noises, and so I don't know where my microphone is, making scratching
Yeah, it's like
noises
that. Yeah.
and kind of doing things to stimulate the senses. So yeah, there's a lot to cover there. And I appreciate these comments here. I see Warrior for Truth said, "Thank you, ladies. You definitely covered a topic that needed some light shined on it." So thank you for that comment. And yeah, and I appreciate that I'm seeing some of the same people who were here before. We didn't get to acknowledge Diane's comments, but she said that her niece was in a cult and married the cult leader's son. And this group is the subject of a recent HBO Max documentary called The Way Down, God, Greed, and the Cult of Gwen Shamblin. And so, wow, Diane, I didn't know that. So your niece actually married the cult leader's son. We're going to have to see that. And is that out now? And where can we? Oh, you said it's on HBO Max. So let's look for that. And yeah, we'll have to talk with you about that some other time, Diane. Maybe we could even have Diane come on sometime if we're going to revisit this topic. All
Okay.
right.
So yeah, so we will see everyone. Thank you, grooving right. Yeah, we're grooving right. Okay, guys. So we will see you next time. And Deb, have a great week. I'll talk to you tomorrow, of course.
Of
So
course.
we'll sign
All
off now. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends. Hit it,
right.
Al.